A policeman crossed a line that should never be crossed, violently laying hands on a little black girl right before her mother's eyes. But no one in the park that day expected Sylvester Stallone to be the one who would intervene and fight back with everything he had. What followed would turn into a moment that shifted everything. Stay with us until the end to hear what unfolded. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss interesting stories. The sun sat high overhead, spilling warm light across the busy neighborhood park. Laughter carried through the air as kids zipped from one play structure to another, their joyful shrieks mixing with the squeak of swings and the soft rustle of leaves overhead. In the middle of the commotion, 7-year-old Ashley moved with infectious delight, her braided hair bouncing as she darted across the mulch-covered ground. She paused only to tackle the monkey bars, her little fingers gripping with determination as she called out to her mother sitting nearby. Elena, perched on a bench beneath the shade of a wide elm, watched her daughter with quiet pride. Her hands rested on a paperback novel now forgotten in her lap. Her eyes, deep, warm, and weathered, held a lifetime of silent endurance. As she took in the children's laughter, the gentle conversations of other parents, she allowed herself to settle into that rare pocket of calm. That calm evaporated the moment a uniformed figure stepped into view. A white police officer, clad in stiff blue, stood still at the edge of the park. Officers were not unfamiliar in the area, but something in this man's rigid posture, the sharpness in his scanning gaze, sent a warning through Elena's body. His eyes moved from child to child until stopping on Ashley. Elena's lips, just moments ago smiling, drew into a tense line as the officer began walking toward her daughter. Each of his steps landed with unnatural weight, cutting through the playground's carefree din. A cold knot of dread formed in Elena's belly. She rose to her feet, her book tumbling silently to the ground. Unaware of the unfolding tension, Ashley sat at the top of the slide, waving at her mother with glee. The officer reached her just then, his presence looming as he halted at the foot of the slide. Elena started toward them, her voice shaking as she called out, "Ashley!" The officer's voice sliced the air. "What are you doing here? You don't belong in this park." His words came out flat and sharp, as though the place, full of joy, irritated him. Without warning, he reached up and seized Ashley's arm. The girl's delight turned instantly to shock. She whimpered, twisting under his grip, her small voice quivering as she cried out for her mother. Her cheeks were wet within seconds. Elena arrived in a rush, her chest tight with panic. "What are you doing to her? Let her go!" she demanded, standing only inches away. The officer didn't loosen his hold. He met her eyes with a chilling calm. "Ma'am, step back. This is official business." Elena's fists clenched. "She's my daughter. You can't just grab her like that." Her voice grew louder, drawing attention. Parents began to look up. A few moved closer, uncertain but concerned. The officer's expression turned more severe. "Step back now, ma'am." Elena stayed put. She reached out to her daughter, but before she could grab hold, the officer shoved her backward. She staggered but didn't fall, fury blazing in her eyes. Ashley sobbed louder, her small frame shaking as she struggled in confusion and fright. The mood in the park changed. Conversations stopped. Several parents pulled out their phones. A few pointed their cameras, recording every second. Through her tears, Elena cried out, "Please, just let her go. She's only a little girl." But the officer's hand remained tight on Ashley's arm, his face unmoved. Elena's voice broke, her face streaked with tears. Fear gnawed at her, but the force of a mother's love held her steady. Then, just when the tension felt unbearable, the air around them shifted. A tall man stood at a distance, quietly observing the commotion, then began walking toward it with deliberate purpose. His pace wasn't rushed, but every step radiated intent. People turned to look, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Something was about to change. As the tall man drew near, his eyes never strayed from the scene unfolding in the playground. Sylvester Stallone, easily recognizable even in casual clothes, had been enjoying a peaceful stroll with his daughters when a child's panicked cries shattered the afternoon calm. His instincts fired like a reflex, and when he saw a uniformed officer gripping a frightened young girl, a chill ran down his spine. Standing by was not an option. The families nearby, frozen in uncertainty, now watched as Stallone approached, their whispers filling the stillness. He walked steadily, his presence calm yet commanding. His daughters remained behind with a trusted friend, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Hey!" The word rang out sharp and firm, slicing through the noise like a judge's gavel. The officer didn't respond immediately, but the child, Ashley, paused her sobbing when she saw the man coming toward her. "Let her go," Stallone said, voice low but unwavering. The officer finally turned, a flicker of annoyance and surprise crossing his face. "Sir, step back. This is official business." Stallone moved in closer, slow and sure. "You're holding a child who's scared out of her mind. That makes it everybody's business." Ashley's trembling hand reached for her mother, who stood paralyzed between fear and hope at the sight of this unexpected protector. Elena tried to speak, her voice caught in her throat, but Stallone raised a hand gently to signal her to hold steady. The officer drew himself up, clearly unused to being confronted in public. "This is a law enforcement issue," he barked, louder now, as though volume might assert dominance. "Step back." Stallone held his ground. "Is that what you call this? She's a kid, and you're terrifying her." His words were calm, but they carried an edge of iron. "You're the one who needs to take a step back." The officer's jaw clenched. Around him, more people had gathered, phones raised, recording. Their attention seemed to fuel his irritation. He let go of Ashley's arm abruptly, though his clenched fists and stiff posture told a different story. The little girl stumbled into her mother's arms, who immediately pulled her close, protective and trembling. "That's enough," Stallone said, moving forward again until he stood squarely between the officer and the child. "You don't put your hands on children, not ever." The officer jabbed a finger at him. "You have no idea what you're getting into." Stallone leaned in just slightly, his voice lower now but no less forceful. "What I'm getting into is making sure she doesn't think every man in uniform is someone to fear." Visibly unsettled, the officer stepped back, though frustration flickered in his eyes. "You think you can just waltz in here and play savior? This is my post." Stallone's gaze hardened. "Your job is to serve and protect, not intimidate. And right now you're failing both." The crowd had grown silent, all eyes and lenses fixed on the pair. The officer glanced around, suddenly aware of the dozens of witnesses. The bravado started to crumble. "You don't tell me how to do my job," he grumbled, but the words were directed more toward the spectators than at Stallone. Unfazed, Stallone looked down at Ashley, now clinging tightly to her mother. Her sobs were quieting, though her small body still trembled. Looking back at the officer, Stallone's tone turned colder. "If your job includes scaring kids like that, then yeah, I will tell you. Back off." For a moment, the tension was a wire drawn tight between them. The officer started, weighing the situation, pride warring with sense. Finally, he took a few steps back. The people nearby stirred, emboldened by the confrontation. Some applauded softly, others murmured words of support. Stallone turned to Elena and Ashley. His expression shifted, softening now. He crouched slightly, his voice gentle as he met the child's frightened gaze. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked. Ashley gave a small nod, her fingers still knotted in her mother's sleeve. Elena offered a shaky smile. "Thank you. I really don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Stallone gave a quiet nod, though he stayed alert. The officer lingered a few feet away, seething, his hand near his radio. Stallone rose and met his eyes once more, issuing a silent challenge. "One wrong move, and I'm still here." Finally, the officer spoke into his radio and began walking away, heading toward the edge of the park. Stallone watched him go, his body still tense, every muscle on alert. Only when the man disappeared from view did he release a slow breath and let his shoulders ease. The crowd slowly began to thin out, some pausing to thank Sylvester Stallone as they passed. He responded with a courteous nod each time, but kept his eyes on Elena and Ashley. "You two all right getting home?" he asked, his voice calm yet laced with concern. Elena gave a firm nod, her voice steadier now. "We'll manage, thanks to you." Sylvester scanned the nearby bystanders still lingering, a flicker of tension tightening his jaw. "I doubt that was the end of it," he murmured, the warning quiet but clear. "Be careful. And if anything happens..." He pulled out his phone and quickly exchanged numbers with Elena. "Reach out." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "We will." He offered Ashley a comforting smile before stepping back. The atmosphere had begun to ease, but an invisible weight hung over those who had witnessed the scene. As Sylvester made his way toward his own family, a nagging feeling settled in his chest. This wasn't finished. The sunlight, which earlier had blanketed the park in a golden glow, now seemed dulled, as if dimmed by the heaviness that still lingered. Stallone remained near the playground, his gaze sweeping across the area to make sure the officer had truly gone. Just as he turned to leave, a harsh voice rang out behind him, freezing him mid-step. "You think you're just gonna walk away?" The officer had come back. His face was flushed with rage and frustration, his movements jittery, one hand hovering close to the weapon at his side. Sylvester turned slowly, his expression unreadable, their eyes locked. His posture remained solid, grounded. "I figured you were done," he said, voice even and measured. "You really want to start this again, right here, with all these folks watching?" The officer stepped forward, ignoring the whispers spreading through the reassembling crowd. He glanced around, but his ego refused to let him back down. "You don't get to play the hero and act like nothing happened. You don't know the whole picture." Sylvester cocked his head slightly, his gaze sharpening. "I know what matters. You laid hands on a child, scared her, caused her pain. That's enough of a story for me." The officer's lip curled. "She looked suspicious." "I was doing my job." His voice was defensive, brittle. "Suspicious?" Sylvester repeated, disbelief edging into his tone. "She's a little girl, 7 years old. She was sliding down a playground slide. What part of that set off your radar?" The officer faltered, jaw tight, unable to justify himself. The silence that followed was deafening, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder. Sylvester took a deliberate step forward, reducing the space between them, his presence steady and immovable. "You saw a child enjoying herself and decided she didn't belong. That's not your duty. That's power misused, and deep down, you know it." A deep red crept into the officer's face, his rage rising. Suddenly he lunged, grabbing Sylvester's shoulder in an effort to shove him. But Sylvester reacted swiftly, his hand clamping down on the officer's wrist with a grip that halted him mid-motion. "Don't," he said, voice dropping into a slow, forceful growl. The officer attempted to pull away, but Sylvester didn't release him right away. Instead, he leaned in slightly, locking eyes with him. "You've already crossed more lines than you should have. Don't take it further." The officer finally jerked his arm free, stumbling a bit as he regained his stance. The fury in his face remained, but now there was uncertainty behind his eyes. The gathering crowd had grown, and now phones were lifted, recording every second. The officer's glance flicked toward the sea of cameras, realization slowly dawning. "You think just because people recognize your face, you're untouchable," he hissed, resentment dripping from his words. "You're not above the law." Sylvester stood with arms folded, steady and composed. "Neither are you. And right now, everyone here sees who's crossing that line." The officer's fists clenched at his sides, his chest rising and falling heavily. The standoff had become public, a spectacle slipping from his control. His scowl began to falter, giving way to something that looked like doubt or fear. Stallone stepped back, giving him room. "Go," he said, voice quiet but firm. "It's over." For a brief second, It looked as though the officer might double down, his pride nearly driving him to push things further. But then, from somewhere in the distance, the sharp wail of sirens sliced through the thick summer air, growing louder with each beat of the heart. His expression soured. Without saying a word, he turned on his heel and stalked off toward the edge of the park. A hushed chorus of whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd as the standoff dissolved. People glanced at one another, trading remarks and trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Stallone remained still, his feet firmly planted, eyes following the retreating figure until the officer finally vanished from view. Only then did he release the breath he'd been holding, his shoulders settling just a bit. Not far away, Elena stood with Ashley clinging to her side, the girl's tiny hand wrapped tightly around her mother's fingers. Elena moved towards Stallone slowly, her face a mix of relief and the lingering edge of fear. "Thank you," she murmured, her words nearly drowned out by the low hum of voices surrounding them. Stallone turned to face her, his features gentler now. "You don't owe me anything," he replied quietly. "I'm just grateful she's all right." Elena nodded, pulling Ashley into a closer embrace. The child pressed her face into her mother's waist, her small body quivering. "She's still frightened," Elena whispered, her voice catching. "I don't know how to make her feel safe again." Stallone knelt down, his knees creaking slightly, and looked the girl in the eye. One broad hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "Hey there," he said, his voice low, steady, and full of warmth. "You're the bravest one here. You know that? What happened wasn't okay. But you didn't do anything wrong. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't belong." Ashley looked up slowly, her big, tear-filled eyes searching his face. "Promise?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He met her gaze, unwavering. "Promise." The sirens were louder now, closer. Stallone rose to his feet, his expression shifting, growing more guarded. "This isn't finished," he said softly to Elena. "But you won't be standing alone." Elena gave a single, resolute nod, her eyes shining. "Thank you," she said again, this time with more strength in her voice. As the first police vehicle pulled into the park's entrance, Stallone straightened, his frame resolute, bracing himself for what lay ahead. The battle wasn't done. But he was committed to seeing it through, for Ashley, for Elena, and for anyone who had ever been made to feel small or helpless in the face of injustice. 2 squad cars pulled up beside the curb, lights flashing, sirens fading. Officers emerged, their faces painted with a mixture of curiosity and wariness as they surveyed the scene before them. The crowd had thinned, but many remained, holding up phones, capturing every second. Stallone stood silently by the playground, unwavering, while Elena kept a protective arm around Ashley. The officer at the center of the incident was pacing nearby, his face a deep shade of red, his movements agitated. He stormed toward the new arrivals, gesturing and speaking rapidly in a clear attempt to control the narrative. Stallone didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the man, muscles tight, every sense alert. A woman stepped forward from the group of new officers. Her posture was firm, her gaze keen, her voice even as she approached. Her badge glinted as the sun dipped lower. "Sir, can you tell me what took place here?" she asked. Stallone gave a brief nod, his tone calm and unwavering. "That officer," he said, gesturing toward the man now in mid-explanation, "grabbed a child without reason. He frightened her, hurt her, refused to let go. I intervened to stop him." The female officer didn't react outwardly, but she turned her head slightly toward where Elena and Ashley stood. "Ma'am," she said gently, "is that accurate?" Elena stepped forward, her voice faint but steady. "Yes," she replied. "My daughter was just playing on the slide when he came up and said she didn't belong. Then he grabbed her. She was terrified. Even when I stepped in, he wouldn't release her." The woman's jaw tightened subtly, and she gave a firm nod. "Thank you," she said, her tone composed yet resolute. "Please stay nearby while we work through this." She turned to the other officers and gestured for them to come closer. Sylvester Stallone stood his ground, arms folded, watching as the group gathered near the officer who had sparked the disturbance. Their conversation was hushed, yet the tension was unmistakable. The officer at the center of it all grew more and more agitated. "I was doing my job," he snapped, loud enough for both Sylvester and Elena to hear. That man had no business stepping in. The female officer held up her hand to stop him. "We'll take it from here, Officer Price. Step aside for now." But Price wasn't ready to stand down. He jabbed a finger toward Sylvester, his face twisted with fury. "He attacked me! He shoved me and threatened me!" Sylvester's expression hardened, his mouth forming a thin, straight line. He said nothing at first, locking eyes with the officer. That silence spoke volumes. The female officer then turned to him. "Is that true?" she asked, her voice level. "I stopped him from harming a child," Sylvester replied, his words firm. "If that made him feel endangered, he might want to reflect on why that is." A murmur swept through the onlookers. People began voicing their support. "He's not telling the truth. That guy didn't do anything wrong. We saw what happened. The officer was way out of bounds." The female officer signaled for quiet again, lifting her hand. She looked back at Price, her face resolute. "We'll sort this out step by step. You'll get a chance to speak." Price opened his mouth, clearly ready to argue, but one of his fellow officers stepped in, resting a calming hand on his shoulder. "Let it go," the man whispered. Price tensed, but held his tongue. The female officer then addressed the crowd. "If you have any recordings or photos, please share them with us. You can speak with any of the officers here or send them directly to the department." Slowly, people began moving forward, phones in hand, offering to help. Sylvester glanced over at Elena, who was now crouched beside Ashley, gently running her fingers through the girl's hair. His face softened briefly before he turned his attention back to the officer. "What happens next?" he asked. She exhaled, as if measuring her response. "We'll examine the footage, gather witness statements, and conduct a full investigation. For now, we ask that everyone remain calm." Price, still visibly upset, muttered something inaudible, but the female officer cut him off with a sharp look. She faced Sylvester again. "Thank you for intervening. We'll make sure this is handled properly." Sylvester gave a short nod, but stayed rooted where he was. "I'm not going anywhere until I know they're safe," he said, motioning to Elena and Ashley. The officer nodded in agreement. "Understood." As the tension began to ease, people started to drift away, though a few lingered, watching from a distance. Elena made her way over to Sylvester, her eyes showing both gratitude and fatigue. "Thank you again," she said softly. "I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't shown up." Sylvester managed a gentle smile. "No need to thank me. It's not finished yet, but you're not alone." Elena nodded, pulling Ashley a bit closer, her arms protectively wrapped around her. The female officer came over again. This time her tone was gentler. "We'll escort you home," she told Elena, "just to make sure everything's okay." Elena hesitated, glancing at Sylvester. He gave a reassuring nod. "Go ahead. It's the right move." Elena and Ashley were led to a nearby patrol car while Sylvester remained behind, his eyes on them until they disappeared from view. The strain of the day settled heavily on his frame, but he stayed upright, grounded by the conviction that he had done what was right. Still, something in him knew this wasn't finished. Not yet. By nightfall, footage of the park incident had exploded across social media. Videos cropped up on every major platform, accompanied by captions expressing both outrage and praise. "Sylvester Stallone confronts officers after child endangered," read one headline. Another asked, "Hero or agitator?" Viral video ignites fierce discussion. The next morning, Elena's phone buzzed endlessly. Messages poured in. Some were from friends and loved ones offering comfort. Others came from total strangers, reaching out with words of support or probing for details. But amid the encouragement, a tide of criticism rose. Online comments accused her of provoking the incident or chasing publicity. Feeling overwhelmed, Elena turned off her phone. Ashley, meanwhile, had grown quieter than usual. She rarely left Elena's side now, too timid to play in the yard or chat with the neighborhood kids. The sparkle that once lit Ashley's face had faded, replaced by a guarded stillness that pierced Elena's heart. Every sudden noise, a knock at the door, a car slowing near the driveway, made Ashley recoil, her small fingers digging into her mother's arm. Sylvester Stallone wasn't immune to the spotlight either. His manager had called with a heads up about the mounting media pressure, but Stallone brushed it off. This wasn't about protecting his name. He had witnessed something wrong and had stepped in. It was that simple. Still, the scrutiny grew as news outlets spun their narratives. Was he a champion for what was right, or had he overreached? Despite the swirling debate, Sylvester kept his attention on what mattered. He reached out to Elena to check in, to offer a sense of calm. "The media buzz will quiet down eventually," he said over the phone. "But right now, what's most important is making sure you and Ashley feel safe." Elena was grateful for his steadiness, but concern lingered. "Ashley's not herself," she confessed. "She's afraid all the time. I don't know how to help her feel safe again." Sylvester was quiet for a moment, the weight of her words settling on him. "Let me come by," he said gently. "Maybe I can talk to her. Remind her she's not alone." Elena hesitated, but finally agreed. That afternoon, when Stallone stepped into their living room, he saw Ashley curled on the sofa, hugging a stuffed animal close. Her eyes lifted to meet his, wary and searching, her arms wrapped tightly around her toy. Sylvester slowly knelt down to her level, his voice low and kind. "Hi there, Ashley," he said with a soft smile. "Do you remember me?" She gave a shy nod, then looked to her mother for reassurance. Elena gave a subtle, encouraging smile. "You know," Stallone went on, "when I saw what was happening, I knew I had to do something. It wasn't right. But you," his voice grew more tender, "you were so brave. Braver than many grown-ups I've known." Her eyes widened at that, and a flicker of pride played across her face. "I was?" she whispered. "You were," he confirmed. "And guess what? You're not facing this alone. There are a lot of people who think you're incredible and want to make sure you're okay." Ashley looked at Elena, then back to Stallone. "Really?" she asked. "Really," he said firmly. "And if you ever feel scared, I want you to remember, your mom and we're always here to protect you." Ashley's small frame relaxed a little, and she offered him a quiet, tentative smile. Elena watched through misty eyes, moved by Sylvester's gentleness and the care in his voice. As time went on, the footage of the incident continued to circulate, drawing widespread attention. Advocacy groups seized on the moment, using it to call for change and justice. Demonstrations followed, voices demanding accountability and reform. Stallone suddenly found himself part of something much bigger than he had anticipated. He hadn't sought to lead a movement, but walking away was no longer an option. And Ashley, slowly but surely, began to recover. With his support, Elena helped her daughter reclaim her sense of safety. They began attending community gatherings, where Ashley met other children with stories like hers. Her brightness, though dimmed, began to shine again. But not all wounds had healed. The officer at the heart of it all, now known to the public as Officer Price, remained unapologetic. He defended his actions in interviews, insisting he'd acted appropriately. His comments only intensified the public's outrage, with many now calling for his removal. Sylvester knew this wasn't the end of the road. He returned to Elena and Ashley, this time with resolve. "We've got to keep this moving," he told her. "It's bigger than just that one moment in the park. It's about making sure no one else has to face the same fear." Elena agreed, though being in the public spotlight continued to make her uneasy. "I just want Ashley to feel safe," she said quietly. "She will," Stallone replied. "And thanks to you, so will a lot of other children." The story had become more than a single act of courage. It had become a symbol, one that drew attention not only to that day, but to the deeper issues it exposed. Sylvester, Elena, and little Ashley became beacons of strength in the face of injustice. That moment had transformed their lives forever. And now, as Elena sat in the courtroom with Ashley's small hand clutched tightly in hers, Sylvester beside them, the air thick with anticipation, the weight of that transformation was felt in every quiet breath. The room held a quiet tension as members of the press, community advocates, and faithful supporters gathered with anticipation. The inquiry into Officer Price's conduct had moved swiftly, its momentum driven by public concern and compelling evidence. The video clips, bolstered by testimonies from eyewitnesses, left little room for doubt. Price's insistence that he had acted within his duties began to fall apart under the weight of what had been seen and heard. Today was not just another court session. It was the moment when outrage met the wheels of justice. The judge entered, and silence blanketed the chamber. As proceedings commenced, the prosecutor methodically laid out the events, emphasizing how Price had not only breached official procedures, but trampled the fundamental dignity owed to a child. Sylvester Stallone sat listening, his expression tense, every word echoing the depth of the harm Ashley had suffered. The defense, seeking to soften the impact, painted Price as a man who had simply made a poor call under pressure. He meant well, the attorney suggested. It had been a lapse in judgment, not a deliberate act of cruelty, but the rebuttal was swift and unflinching. The prosecutor replayed the footage, the courtroom dimming as the images flickered to life. A collective gasp rose as the screen showed Price's hands grasping Ashley, his figure looming large beside her small, distressed frame. Her cries cut through the stillness, each one a blow to the silence. Then it was Stallone's moment to speak. He rose with quiet assurance and took the stand. He chose his words carefully, each one laced with purpose. He described the moment he had intervened, why he felt compelled to act. A place meant for happiness should never become a source of fear, he said with calm conviction. What I witnessed that day wasn't about keeping anyone safe. It was about control. And it was wrong. After him, Elena spoke, her voice soft, yet filled with resolve. She recounted the nights Ashley had clung to her in fear, the lingering shadows the incident had left behind, and her commitment to protecting other families from the same anguish. Too young to testify, Ashley remained beside her mother, her hand nestled in Elena's. When the judge pronounced the verdict, the silence gave way to quiet sighs and restrained applause. Officer Price was found guilty of misconduct and was immediately relieved of duty. The ruling didn't erase what had been done, but it offered a measure of justice, a flicker of hope in a world that too often denied both. Outside, a storm of reporters closed in, cameras flashing like lightning. Elena shielded Ashley from the noise, while Stallone stood his ground, answering questions with the same steady voice that had guided him throughout. "This is bigger than one man or one moment," he said. "It's about building a world where every child knows they are safe, where skin color or heritage doesn't determine how you're treated. We've taken a step, but the road ahead is long." His words echoed far and wide, spreading through media outlets and into the hearts of many. Sylvester's calm strength became a symbol for those yearning for justice. Yet for him, it was never about recognition. His heart remained with Ashley and Elena, and with every soul who had ever been made to feel invisible. In the days that followed, life gently resumed its course for Elena and Ashley. The love from their neighbors, the care from local groups offering therapy, support, and protection was more than they had expected. Ashley began to rediscover her laughter, her joy, her courage. She played again, found peace in the sunshine, and even began telling her story to other children, her voice growing stronger with every word. Stallone remained present in their lives, his visits bringing reassurance. On one such afternoon, he presented Ashley with a delicate bracelet, etched with the words, "You are brave." It became her daily companion, a quiet talisman of her own inner strength. One quiet day, sitting in the familiar comfort of Elena's living room, Ashley climbed onto his lap, her eyes thoughtful. "You said I'm brave," she whispered, "but I was scared." Stallone offered a gentle smile, his hand resting on her back. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid," he said warmly. "It means you keep going, even when you are. And that's exactly what you did." Ashley's face lit up, her arms looping around his neck as she hugged him close. From the side, Elena looked on, her eyes glistening with emotion, her heart filled with quiet, enduring thanks. Amid the turbulence, they had discovered something enduring: hope. Even months later, the echoes of that afternoon in the park hadn't faded. The local police department had launched updated training efforts centered on de-escalation and community engagement. Advocacy groups gained traction, pushing for systemic change. And while Sylvester Stallone eventually returned to the rhythm of his work and daily routine, he carried with him the quiet weight of that day's lessons, committed to using his visibility to uplift the voices too often overlooked. Life continued for Elena and Ashley. Though not without its hurdles, they moved forward with a new understanding that they were no longer navigating the world alone. They had drawn strength from each other and from a community that had stood with them. On one bright afternoon, as Ashley darted across the playground and her laughter rose like music on the wind, Elena felt the deep truth of what they had gained. It was more than any legal verdict. They had reclaimed a piece of their peace. The months after their day in court brought a mix of adjustments and new beginnings for the mother and daughter. The gavel had fallen, but the impact lingered. Ashley still showed signs of caution, pausing at thresholds, her eyes flickering behind her as though remembering. Elena poured herself into helping her daughter feel safe again, all while navigating her own quiet path of recovery. Their modest home, once a retreat of predictable routines, pulsed with the movement of transformation. The support from their community went beyond kind words. Ashley received scholarship offers. Programs sprang up to aid local families. And at the very park where everything had unfolded, an artist painted a mural showing children of all races playing under the words, "This space is for everyone." Elena stepped back into the classroom with a renewed sense of mission. Teaching became more than curriculum. It was now about courage. She encouraged her students to stand up, to speak out, and to listen. Her presence in the room carried a grounded strength that hadn't been there before. Outside school, she embraced her role in the broader conversation. She lent her voice to advocacy circles and addressed gatherings focused on fairness and belonging. Ashley, in her own quiet way, began to blossom. She hadn't spoken much about what had happened at first, but as the months went by, she began to share her experience with increasing ease. Her classmates leaned in as she recounted the day she felt fear and the moment people rose up for her. Before long, Ashley was recognized not just as a survivor, but as someone who inspired others, soft-spoken, yet unshakably strong. One afternoon, she came home clutching a flyer folded in her backpack. It advertised a youth initiative teaching kids how to stand up for justice. "Can I try this, Mom?" she asked, eyes wide with excitement. Elena's smile came quickly, her heart filled with admiration. "Absolutely," she said. "I think you'd be wonderful." Stallone remained a quiet but steady part of their world. Though his visits became less frequent as his commitments resumed, he stayed in touch, sending thoughtful messages or showing up unannounced for a few hours with Ashley. On one visit, he handed her a simple notebook. The outside was plain, but inside, pages waited, some bearing inspirational quotes, others left blank for Ashley's thoughts. "This is where your big ideas go," he said gently, watching as she flipped through the book. "You've got something important to share, and people need to hear it." Ashley beamed, pressing the notebook close to her. "I'm going to write everything," she said, her voice brimming with resolve. As the months passed and the air began to cool, life for Elena and Ashley found a gentle rhythm again. The park, once a place marked by fear and uncertainty, had become their haven. Laughter returned to its open spaces as Ashley dashed toward the swings, her eyes alight with the joy of reclaimed innocence. From a nearby bench, Elena watched her with quiet thankfulness, not only for Sylvester Stallone's help that pivotal day, but for the many unseen hands that had lifted them up through their darkest moments. One crisp autumn evening, an unexpected sound broke the calm, a knock at the door. Elena opened it cautiously and was surprised to find Officer Price standing there. He looked unsure of himself, his stance rigid, but there was an honesty in his expression that caught her off guard. A wave of tension passed through her as her eyes flicked toward the room where Ashley played. She instinctively stepped forward to shield her child. "I'm not here to upset anything," Price said quickly, as if he could feel the storm behind her silence. "I came to say I'm sorry." Elena's eyes narrowed. She hadn't imagined this moment, had never even expected to see him again after the courtroom had gone quiet. Yet here he was, searching for the right words. "I've thought a lot about what I did," he admitted, his voice low. "How I treated your daughter. And you. There's no excuse." Elena folded her arms, anchoring herself as emotions stirred beneath her steady gaze. "Why now?" she asked, her tone calm but pointed. "Why show up here?" He shifted uneasily, the weight of his conscience evident. "Because it's overdue. I've joined a community outreach group. They've opened my eyes. I realize now how blind I was to the harm I caused. I know I can't undo it, but I needed to say this in person." Elena studied him, unsure whether his regret was enough. She didn't owe him forgiveness. Still, something in his voice, in the way he didn't flinch under her scrutiny, gave her pause. "Ashley's been through more than most kids her age should," she said, each word deliberate. "If you really want to do better, then don't let what happened to us happen to another family." Price's shoulders lowered slightly as he nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. "I will," he said. "Thank you for hearing me out." She closed the door behind him with a quiet click, her heart heavy but no longer bitter. Ashley appeared at her side, slipping her small hand into Elena's palm. "Who was that?" she asked. Elena crouched down, her eyes meeting her daughter's with warmth. "Someone trying to fix something?" she replied gently. "But you don't need to worry about him." Ashley grinned and held up her notebook. "I wrote about today," she announced proudly. Elena's smile widened as she drew her daughter into a hug. "You're going to make a difference in this world, Ashley," she whispered. "I can already feel it." As the evening grew still and the house settled into a peaceful hush, Elena felt the weight of the past begin to lift. Though their journey had been marked by pain, it had also led them to resilience, to love, to purpose. What had once been a story of loss was now becoming a story of renewal, one they would continue to write together. Thank you for staying with us through this heartfelt journey. If Elena and Ashley's story touched something in you, if it reminded you of the strength that can grow out of hardship, or the quiet power of forgiveness, then you're not alone. These stories matter because they reflect the resilience in all of us. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. And if there's someone in your life who could use a little hope today, share this video with them. Every view, every comment, every share helps us keep telling stories that inspire, heal, and connect. We'll see you in the next one.